Now to do the mid-season grades for the teams in the Western Conference. The grades I am giving are based mostly on my perception of the team coming into the season and what I perceive them to be now, their expectations coming into the season, not necessarily how good or great they are doing. Again, we're going to get the really bad teams out the way because there's just really not much to say about them. Portland and San Antonio, they're both getting Fs. Portland is in full rebuild and they just aren't that good. They surprisingly do beat some good teams here and there. See if they move Brogdon at the deadline. He's been rumored to be shopped, and a lot of teams are interested, including the Knicks. San Antonio, they've been better lately, and they get an F simply for refusing to start a point guard for the first 25 to 30 games. I mean, that experiment was really dumb. I understand there was really not much to lose because you were expecting to be a bad team anyway. But as you see now that you're starting Trey Jones, that you have unlocked Victor Wembanyama. I mean, now even on a minutes restriction, you see Victor Wembanyama constantly putting up 20-point double-doubles, multiple block games. I mean, he is a special talent, and he's likely, I think, the Rookie of the Year. I know Chet's getting a lot of mention as well, but I think Chet is benefiting from how good his team is. Victor Wembanyama, was fighting, against the grain for a good while in San Antonio, but it looks a lot better now. We'll see. Maybe they have a better, they look a lot more competitive in the second half of the season. Denver Nuggets obviously won the title last year. They're getting a B grade. They're 32-15. They're fourth in the West right now, but they're only a game back of the first seed. I feel like this team does have a little bit of a championship hangover. Not too severe, but you can tell that there's nights that they just don't get up for their opponent. No concerns when it comes to the playoffs, though. There's no doubt in my mind when they get to the playoffs that they're going to be the team to beat. That if you're gonna want to make the finals, you're gonna have to go through Denver at some point. But those minutes with Jokic on the bench are definitely a potential problem. They have been for the past few seasons. You're relying on Reggie Jackson, Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, DeAndre Jordan, and they've had some great games, all of them individually this season, but you wonder in a playoff setting without Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, who were kind of big for them off the bench in last year's playoffs, if they're going to be able to survive those minutes that Jokic is not on the floor. To move on to the Dallas Mavericks, I'm giving them a C grade. They're kind of right where I think most people expected them to be. They're 25-21. They're 8th in the West. Kyrie and Luka have both missed games for, various injuries. My main problem with the Mavericks is that they heavily rely upon Luka's playmaking and just shot-making ability. That if he plays poorly, this team has no chance of winning. And if you saw the other night, obviously he's coming off that 73-point game that has had a lot of people with a lot of fake outrage about the defense in the NBA. I'm not going to have that discussion on this episode, maybe on another day. Maybe the Mavericks were in that game the entire time with one of their players going absolutely nuclear. And I think that is a microcosm of what their season has been like. Especially if Kyrie is not there, everything falls upon Luka to create, to score, to distribute. Everyone on that team needs him to have good games. I think they make the playoffs this year. They're going to be in the play-in, so you never know. But if they do get in there, it's going to be interesting to see, especially with the matchup they get, if a Luka-Kyrie duo can actually work. Is there enough there to make up for how poorly they are as a rebounding team, their lack of size, and just defensively overall? But, Luka's having a fantastic season. 73 points is a ridiculous feat. Now to the Utah Jazz. I'm giving them an A grade, and you're like, what? Yeah, I know they're only 24-23. They're 10th in the West, but no one, mostly me, I guess, I can't speak for everyone, but I did not expect the Jazz to even compete in the West. I thought they were going the whole other direction. I considered that they were going to move Lauri Markkanen, which was a rumor to start the season, that they were willing to listen on trade offers for Lauri Markkanen. It was going to take a lot to get him, but I'm thinking they're trying to cash in on draft picks. They're not looking to win. They don't have a chance of really competing with the roster that they have, especially when we look at the rest of the West. But you know what? They're balling. Sexton and Markkanen have been sensational, especially over the past month. They were 10-18 on December 20th. Since then, they've gone 14-5, and they're a really tough team to beat at home. They're 15-6 at home. It's going to be interesting to see in the second half of the season, do they keep this up, if they actually push for a play-in spot. They're in one right now. They're 10th. See if they can keep that play-in spot, and they're actually a threat to one of those other play-in teams. And to a team, now that I just mentioned, the Houston Rockets, who've kind of fallen off they're falling out of the playoff race. They're going to get a C plus anyway. I know they're 21-24. They're 6-12 in their last 18 games. They've really kind of fallen off, but I think it's better to look at the big picture when you look at the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka, kind of a little bit of a controversial hire, but you knew with how he turned around Boston last season after they had a really bad start. Not last season, but season before, the season they made the finals. They had a poor start and they really turned it around. His impact on this team is apparent. This team has a defensive identity. We're not necessarily a defensive personnel. There's no one really on that team you look at and say, oh, they're a great defender, and people know that. But as a group, collectively, they are locked into playing defense, and that is what's helped them win games, especially in the early parts of the season. They're top 6 in defensive rating so far this season. But it's just going to take some time for the rest of the talent to improve and to mature. They're terrible on the road, which is, a telltale sign of a young team. But they're 16-8 at home. And a question for me is really just, I'm not sure if Jalen Green is someone they want to build around. I'm not sure if he's that type of player. He hasn't really shown more than what we already knew about him coming into the league, is that he was a dynamic scorer, super athletic, great ball handler. But can you trust him to run an offense? Is he a guy that you can rely upon as a foundational piece for the future? They brought in Fed VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. That has definitely helped the team, helped with some of their maturity. Jabari Smith Jr., I think, is going to be a really good player in this league. Tari Eason is a good player. They have a lot of good talent. Sengun, I almost forgot to mention him. Sengun's having a great year. It's going to be interesting to see if he's named an all-star. I think he definitely deserves it. We'll just see in terms of the voting with how many forwards and bigs they're going to let in. But Sengun has definitely had a fantastic season at center for them. It's a good young roster that I think is going to be interesting to look forward to these next couple seasons as they continue to build upon what they've done this season. So yeah, they might miss the playoffs, but they're a C+ because they're just actually a competitive team that isn't a joke that they have in the past couple years. Now to one of the top teams in the Western Conference, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're going to get an A+ from me because honestly, they shattered my expectations completely of what they were going to be this season. I expected them to be in a similar position as they were last season, which was in the play-in, but instead they are one of the elite teams in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is on his way to superstardom. I'm not ready to put him in that top 10 group yet. Some people are, but he's definitely on his way. And they're the best defense in the league. I mean, I did not expect them to be the best defense in the league. But when you look at things, it kind of makes sense. Jaden McDaniels, great defender. Rudy Gobert has been a multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year in this league. He's going to possibly win it again. And last season, you had Cat miss so much time. You just weren't sure what the team really looked like. But this season, we're seeing Cat and Rudy Gobert, what that duo in the front court really looks like. And then along with, the steady hand that is Mike Conley and the superstar talent that Anthony Edwards has, that they are an elite team. There's a lack of a scoring punch there, especially off the bench. They're 22nd in the league in points per game. So that's definitely something that they can improve upon. Maybe they make a little small deal at the deadline. Let's see how this Minnesota team finishes this season, what they do in the playoffs, because they're going to have a top seed. They're going to be expected to at least make the second round. And depending on who they have to play, if they have to play the Clippers or the Nuggets, it's hard to think, despite how good Minnesota has been, that they're going to beat either one of those teams in a 7-game series. But now to Oklahoma City, the other team occupying the first seed in the Western Conference, they're also going to get an A+. Because again, I did not think they were going to be this good this soon. I think everyone expected eventually that the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to be a really good team just because of the sheer talent they have on that roster. Shai, all-NBA player last season, averaging 30 points per game. But they, of course, have drastically exceeded what I thought. They're 32-14 on the season. Mark Daigneault is definitely, right now, probably the leading candidate for Coach of the Year because of the job he's done with this roster. I had my doubts, but, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has established himself as a top 3 guard in the league. And now even as an MVP candidate, it's going to be interesting to see if Joel Embiid misses more games and he's disqualified for winning the MVP. The next guy in line is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They're a top 5 team in both defensive, offensive efficiency. Again, the same questions though. Will the youth affect them in the playoffs? They never have been there before. I think it's a real thing for me, at least. There's a lot of heavy hitters below them that, even though they're not doing as great in the season, like Denver, like the Clippers, even like Phoenix and even LA, that if you match them up in a 7-game series, you think those teams have a chance because they have guys that have been there before and they have that pedigree. Oklahoma City and Minnesota don't, but it's gonna be a question to see whether that really affects them or not. Now to the Phoenix Suns, I'm gonna give them a B grade for the season. They really struggled at the start of the season dealing with the injuries. That was just kind of the constant conversations. You can't really judge this team till all 3 are there. But now the big 3 are playing. They're all playing well. They look like exactly what I think most people thought they'd look like. They're an elite offensive team that can create shots at will, but yet they're still an average defensive team, and that's going to be their problem. Now, being great offensively, that's enough to be a good team now in the regular season, but will in the playoffs, the trio of 3 guys who all are shot creators, all get their shots basically the same way, can that work? We just saw Devin Booker go off for 60 and they lost. Those are the type of things. You have guys that just can score, but can you get the timely stops? Can you do the necessary things, the little things? That's going to always be the question with the Phoenix Suns, but I think they're going to be a playoff team for sure. They're going to be an exciting team to watch in the playoffs. Now to the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously a big disappointment. Their season has been kind of derailed. I'm going to give them a D- just out of sympathy. They're 18-27. They're currently 13th in the West. Unfortunately, Ja Morant's unavailability has rendered this season kind of a waste. The team went 7-18 in those 25 games. They were very, very bad. And then he came back, played 9 games. They were 6-3 in those 9 games, and everyone thought, oh, the Grizzlies can make a run. They weren't super out of it. It was still early enough that if they were great for the rest of the season, that they could still squeeze into the play-in, maybe even a playoff spot. But then Ja Morant tears his labrum, which is in his shoulder, and he opts for season-ending injury, so it's kind of put their season to rest. They're 12-24 overall this season without Morant, which is a little surprising given that in the past they had been great without him. So most people, like I did, thought they'd still be competitive, at least for the time being. They'd hover around 500, and then when Ja Morant came back, they'd get back to being the elite team that they were last year. They were the 2nd seed in the Western Conference. They fell to the Lakers in the first round, in due part to the injuries that they had in the playoffs. But now it seems like their season's pretty much dead. Sacramento Kings, kind of the same team they were last year, no? Kind of think same team, nothing really special, nothing really different. But I gave them a B because of the 5th seed in the West, a really competitive West this season. They're 26-18. I definitely feel like this team can be dangerous come the playoffs because of how great they are offensively. If you look at their placement in the seedings, they're going to play the Clippers and the Nuggets in the first round. And I would not take them to be either one of those teams right now in a 7-game series. But those are 2 really tough matchups for a first-round series to get the defending champions or the Clippers with 4 Hall of Famers on it. Now to the Golden State Warriors. I've talked about the Golden State Warriors on this show before. I'm giving them a D grade because it's just, I think, a complete opposite to what people expected. I think most people expected they were still going to be a competitive team, that they were even going to be better than they were last season. How bad Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson have been this season, and then all the hijinks and shenanigans that Draymond Green has brought to this team, and the suspension and the missing games. They're 19-24 on the season, which is 12th in the conference. They're 3 full games out of a playoff spot. They lost an overtime thriller to probably the game of the year so far against the Lakers that went to double overtime. Curry was magnificent as usual, but that was it. The rest of the team, they're still a bad rebounding team. They have no size, and they're relying on a lot of guys that just are unproven. Brandon Podziemski is a great player, good draft pick. Trace Jackson Davis has been good for them, but it's just they don't have the size. They don't have enough scoring outside of Curry. They don't even have the playmaking now with the injury to Chris Paul. The Warriors are actually a better team if you look at their plus-minus when Steph Curry's off the court. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting they're a better team without him, but there's something obviously that's working when Steph Curry isn't on the floor that doesn't work when he's on the floor. And that's something that Steve Kerr is going to have to figure out. And it's definitely a roster situation that just doesn't complement Curry in his style of play the way that the rosters had previously in the years, obviously, that they won titles. I think the Warriors are going to have to take a really long, introspective look on this team and what needs to be done going forward, especially if they're not able to squeeze into the play. And I'm not going to give up on them in that aspect. I think they can definitely still squeeze into the play-in. But there's really nothing you've seen so far. We're already 45 or so games in. Nothing you've seen so far that says, all right, this team is going to have a turnaround. This team, they're still trying to figure out. This team looks like it is what it is, and it's not a good team, and that's just what it is. Now, to the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm going to give them a B- grade. They're 26 and 20 on the season, which is the 7th seed in the West. They're just a game back of the 5th seed. They're having a good season, you know what, because guys are healthy. Zion, Ingram, McCollum, they've been healthy for majority of the season. They're a good team otherwise. They have a good supporting cast, Valanciunas, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, who I've heard some chatter about him being traded. I'm not sure why they would do that. I think he's having a really good season, especially offensively. Has taken strides offensively. We already know he's a great defender. But to me, the jury is still out if Zion can be your franchise player. Is that someone you can still build around? Is he reliable enough for that to still be the case? Now, to the Los Angeles Lakers, I've obviously talked about the Lakers a lot. I picked them to go to the finals. I'm not going to flip-flop. I'm still going to stay with them because there's a good team in here. I'm giving them a D, and that D grade stands for Darvin Ham. Man, it's hard to really overstate how bad of a job Darvin Ham is doing with the Los Angeles Lakers. This team should not be 24 and 23. They should not be the 9th seed. They shouldn't be the 1st seed in the West because they were always going to need some tweaking with the roster. There was always going to be a question if D'Lo was going to be moved or not. They still need another big that they can rely upon to play in non-Anthony Davis minutes. I've never seen a coach actively try and hinder his own team, and I don't understand why he's doing it. It's whether he doesn't know better or he's getting, direction from somebody else that we don't know, but he plays role players out of position. A lot of combination of one-way players that are just going to destined to fail. I mean, their starting lineup has D'Lo, Austin Reeves, Taurean Prince, LeBron, Anthony Davis. But that 3 in the front court with Taurean Prince, all poor defenders. Taurean Prince, I think, would be a good player if he only played about 20 minutes a night, but instead he's being played 35 minutes a night, being trusted to start every single night and be your number 1 point of attack defender for the best wing on the other team. It's just a recipe for disaster. You're setting him up for failure. He's not built for that. They have a guy built for that in Jared Vanderbilt. You re-signed him over the summer to be that. Why is he coming off the bench? Why is he seeing limited minutes? And then you could just go down the list of guys. Max Christie doesn't have a role, doesn't play when he's proven to be a serviceable two-way guard. Rui Hachimura, who they re-signed over the summer as well, he barely gets any minutes, doesn't have a consistent role. Christian Wood, whenever he gets playing time, plays well. There was questions of him defensively. Why was he a free agent for so long? He's proven that on a vet minimum. He's helped with rebounding. He's been a decent defender. He can shoot, space the floor, score, is a great finisher. It just doesn't make sense that Cam Reddish was starting games this season, playing 30 minutes. Taurean Prince is the only guy, it seems, on this roster that hasn't been benched. D'Lo's been benched. Now he's back in the starting lineup, lighting it up. Austin Reeves, he was coming off the bench for a while. It's just a lot going wrong. It just doesn't make sense. Darvin Ham doesn't call any timeouts. When a team gets on a run, your opponent, if they go on a 6-0 run, 7-0 run, a good coach calls a timeout. You get a break in the action, regroup. Let's talk about it a little bit, what they're doing, try and stop them. You could draw up a play so that you can stop their run. He does none of that. In that game they had against the Brooklyn Nets about a week or two ago, he watched his team go from being up 12 to down 19. He just watched on the sideline with his hands in his pockets. Now, according to Jeannie Buss and the Lakers front office, his job is safe. And why is his job safe? I don't think anyone with a brain can answer that question, why his job is safe. We just saw Adrian Griffin, who was coaching the second best team in the East, get fired because, you know what? They saw he wasn't doing a good job. The vibes wasn't good. Players didn't like him. It's obvious that the Lakers players are no longer playing for him. They're playing for each other. LeBron looks disengaged on the bench whenever Darvin Ham's drawing something up. He's been making faces and stuff. You could fault him for that, maybe fault him for some leadership here. But if you got a coach that just clearly doesn't know what he's doing, it's hard to follow a guy you just don't like and don't trust in. And it's clear the Lakers no longer trust in Darvin Ham. It's been clear for a couple weeks now. But the Laker organization, will they do anything about it? I doubt it. They should not be struggling this much where every game it's a shootout. The Warriors are struggling, and they went to double overtime with them with a roster that's better. They should be starting the lineup that got them to the Western Conference Finals, which includes Jared Vanderbilt in with D'Lo, Reeves, LeBron, and AD. You have LeBron and Anthony Davis playing like top 10 players, and they've been healthy for majority of the season. And I hate to harp on it. That's probably be the last time I harp on it until they fire Darvin Ham. There's really not much to talk about. They're going to be in the play-in, most likely. They're going to be a dangerous team because they've shown they won the in-season tournament. But just in the regular season, they're just going to be a roller coaster. They're going to be all over the place. Now, to move on to the other LA team, and this is our last team of the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers. They're going to get an A. I mean, it didn't look good those first 2 weeks when they first got James Harden. You know, we had concerns about if this was going to all fall apart, if they had made a grave mistake, and we all look like fools now for questioning that, because you know what? Ty Lue and this group of guys, they've really rallied together. They are 30-14 on the season. They're third in the West. They're a game back of the 1 seed. They look shaky. Everyone thought that, but you know what? Since December 1st, they're 22-4. It's the best record since that date. This has got to be the year, right? This looks like finally, this is the Clipper team you could actually believe can win the title. You know, everyone just set it off of faith because of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and they had deep rosters. This team is not as deep as they had been previously, but you got a team with a lot of star power. Russell Westbrook fits on this team, coming off the bench, playing with that second unit. Kawhi is healthy. Paul George is healthy. Harden, for now, is playing really, really well, has really embraced being that point guard. He's made everything easier for everyone on the team. And even without Zubac, they've still been playing really well. Mason Plumlee has filled in that role. He's been a great backup big for his entire career. Health is always going to be the question. Obviously, the one injury can really hurt this. But as of right now, if they go into the playoffs healthy, it's hard to pick another team over them just because of the sheer star power. Denver, obviously, probably the favorite just because they won last year, but the Clippers, a real threat in the Western Conference. How reliable the bench will be is another question, but I think they got it all figured out right now. They are easily one of the best teams in the NBA right now, and Ty Lue obviously is going to be also a candidate for Coach of the Year. He's done a fantastic job and shows you know what? Coaching matters. As whether you're new or old, be sure to like, share the video, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel at True Troops for more basketball content.